Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has been quoted as saying that migration from nations in Africa will end if countries like France stopped exploiting the continent's people and natural resources. The remarks made before she became Prime Minister have ignited anger in Paris. Let's listen to her statement.
Questo si chiama franco CFA. È la moneta coloniale che la Francia stampa per 14 nazioni africane alle quali applica il signoraggio e in forza delle quali sfrutta le risorse di questa nazione. Questo è un bambino che lavora in una miniera d'oro in Burkina Faso. Il Burkina Faso è una delle nazioni più povere del mondo.
Hello, I'm Mubarak Kenya and a warm welcome to Africa Today, a weekly program that gives you an alternative view of news and events making headlines in Africa. Today we are focusing on the fallout between France and Italy of African migrants entering Europe through the Mediterranean Sea. Italian officials believe that continued plundering of African countries by France is the reason for the flow of illegal migrants from Africa. The second part of our program will be on renewed fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo amid accusations between Kigali and Kinshasa over who is responsible for the upsurge in rebel attacks. Our experts will give us their incisive analysis of these topics, and you can be part of the conversation by sending us your comments through our social media handle.
Italy slams French colonialism in Africa. A video of Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni condemning French economic imperialism in Africa during an interview she gave to an Italian TV in January 2019 has recently re-emerged and received much praise both in Europe and Africa. The viral video came amid tensions between Italy and France over a migrant rescue ship. Italy's policy of keeping its ports closed to ships carrying rescued migrants has raised tensions between Rome and Paris.
Italy's new government barred the Ocean Viking ship from docking with 230 migrants. France termed the move as unacceptable behavior, but Italy insists it's been taking in its share of migrants. The Italian Prime Minister blasted the response by France, describing it as incomprehensible and unjustified.
I've been very much struck by the French government's aggressive reaction, which from my point of view is incomprehensible and unjustified. Almost 90,000 people have entered Italy since the start of the year. On the same day of our discussions about the Ocean Viking, 600 people arrived in small boats. But for 234 people, they've made diplomatic relations blow up.
Now, for more on the latest spat between Italy and France over African migrants, we contacted DeBar, an activist and commentator. Thanks for your time today. Now, was the Italian Prime Minister justified in saying migration from Africa would stop if countries like France halted exploitation of the continent's valuable resources?
Well, this is true of the immigration waves around the world. It's the same situation here with the massive immigration from Central and South America and the Caribbean. People are following their stuff basically to the empire. In the case of Africa, Africa's been looted by Europe, 500 years now, and the things that were built with the wealth of Africa and on the back of African labor, both Africans working in Africa and Africans that were stolen and dragged off, either by force or by market force, to build these wonderful cities on the hill. That's where all their wealth is. So they're going there too to try to have some of it. That's an absolutely correct statement. France, as a matter of fact, is one of the, next to the U.S. and the U.K., one of the worst offenders, and as a matter of fact, has been recapturing its colonies in the last 10, 15 years.
The French-Italian feud is the latest episode in the standoff over where to disembark refugees, picked up after trying to reach Europe from North Africa. In 2019, The then Italian Deputy Prime Minister, Luigi Di Maio, accused France of continuing to colonize Africa and causing people to migrate from the continent.
There are dozens of African countries where France is printing a currency of its own, the franc of the colonies. And with that currency, French debt is financed. If France didn't have African colonies, which it's impoverishing, it would be the 15th world economic power.
It appears there are deep-rooted differences between Italy and France in Africa. The spat between Rome and Paris is seen by many as rivalry between two European powers that colonized African countries.
Imputing intent is a fool's errand. But the history of Italy in Africa is distinct from the history of France, certainly, and of some other colonial powers. Italy was, in the modern age, mostly confined to the northeastern part of Africa and the eastern, the Horn, particularly Ethiopia and Libya. And Libya, as a matter of fact, is like 400 kilometers from Sicily, from Italy, across the Mediterranean. But the critique is correct. Even as France was kicked out as the colonial power nominally, they preserved the right to print the currency for these countries. In other words, the economy of each of these countries was still entirely in the hands of Paris.
Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said in Rome recently that Italy can lead in EU-Africa cooperation. Now, she claimed that Italy will pursue a non-predatory but collaborative posture. Now, can African countries really trust Italy, which appears to indicate that it has the continent's interests at heart?
Italy has Italy's interests at heart. You can only hope that the leaders of Italy have at least that much. The Africans have their own interests at heart, and the proof, whatever deal someone brings to Africa, whether it's good or bad for Africa, will be determined by people in Africa and by Africans, and they will test who's a good partner and an honest partner and who's not as they engage and as they have engaged. There is competition now. Before, you had the United States, you had European countries which are under the military occupation of the United States, and that was basically it. And the relationship was essentially they come there with guns, they point the guns at the people, they tell them go into the mines and bring us all the stuff, put it on our boats, and then they leave. And they come back for more when the boat's empty. So what Italy intends to do or doesn't intend to do, you can go all the way back to Carthage and look at the relationship. I mean, there's a lot of contradictions there. But what matters is that Africans have agency that is protected by the world community to make up their own mind about what's good or not good for them and to act accordingly.
The vast majority of Africans attempting the Mediterranean crossing to Europe pass through Libya. Now, Italy and France were both involved in NATO's military intervention in Libya that destabilized the country and created the current migrant crisis. What's your take on this?
Well, yeah. Right now, Libya is basically a failed state with various factions competing for power. And the United States, you have the CIA backs one faction, the Pentagon backs another. This kind of disruption in people's lives, the disruption in labor markets in Europe, the disruption in the lives of people in Africa. There are some people who make money on all of it, and they're making policy in the United States, and they're making policy in Brussels as well for the EU. And so the solution is going to be to stabilize all of the places where, the empires created chaos, basically, let people sit still where they are and repair and rebuild their homes and, their towns and all of the things that keep being destroyed by, U.S. bombings and terrorist attacks and such that are financed by the West. And just let people live their own lives. That'll solve the problem.
More than 50,000 people worldwide have lost their lives during their migratory journeys since the International Organization of Migration started documenting deaths in its Missing Migrants project in 2014. Africa is the second deadliest region for people on the move, with more than 9,000 deaths during migration documented on the continent since 2014. Leading Pan-Africanist PLO Lumumba says African migrants are compelled to take the dangerous journey across the Mediterranean because African countries are weak.
I watched a woman from Nigeria who had been rescued from the Mediterranean around Lampedusa say, "I will not go back to Africa. Even if I die in the Mediterranean, I'll try again and again." What is it that can make a human being say that I do not want to go back to my home? Because the natural instinct of a human being should be that you want to go home. It's because we are weak.
Now, what, in your opinion, is a solution that will reduce the flow of African economic migrants to Europe?
They've weaponized poor people by sending them out of their own homes, blowing up their homes, basically, in Africa and Asia and Latin America. And people move to places where there's jobs and homes and other things that you need to live. And this depresses labor markets and changes the entire political configuration and creates chaos in everybody's lives except for the people who sit on top. And so, whatever solution is done, the real solution is to stop destroying people's homes, stop starving them with sanctions, stop making war on them, stop backing terrorists, etc. Just leave people alone and let them do business with the things that they have, and people will be fine. They'll figure the rest of it out.
Well, there you have it. If Western countries stop spreading wars and plundering other countries, the problem of illegal migration will be solved. I'd like to thank our guest, DeBar, for his insight. Let's now take a short break before we turn our attention to the upsurge of deadly violence in the mineral-rich eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Stay with us.
Rising tensions in the DRC.
Hundreds of people have been killed over the last few weeks in the Democratic Republic of Congo in attacks blamed on the M23 rebel group. Now, the killing of innocent civilians started just days after the announcement of a fragile ceasefire agreement.
The Democratic Republic of the Congo repeatedly accuses neighboring Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels, an accusation that Rwanda regularly denies. In a bid to stop the violence in the mineral-rich eastern DRC, the East African community decided to deploy troops in one of its member states for the first time in June 2022. The deployment in the Democratic Republic of the Congo will test the regional body's ability to respond to complex conflicts.
Meanwhile, the people of Eastern DRC have been holding protests following increased attacks by the M23 rebels.
Our fellow citizens were killed by the M23 terrorists, and the president declared 3 days of national mourning.
It's too much. We've had enough. We don't want war. We are here for peace. Congolese people want peace, but our neighbors don't want to give it to us.
Now, to discuss the ongoing violent conflict in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have contacted Claude Gatebuke. He's the executive director of the African Great Lakes Action Network. Gatebuke is also the co-author of the book Survivors Uncensored. Thanks for your time today, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what's the reason for the upsurge of insecurity in the eastern part of DRC, where many civilians have been killed?
The basic reason for the violence in the Congo and it's constant. And that is the riches of the Congo. The Congo is the richest country in natural resources. It has over $24 trillion, or an estimated $24 trillion worth of resources in its soil. So there is a scramble for resources in the Congo by multinationals around the globe, mostly Western multinationals. And then to be able to access it, the West has decided that it's best to use its local mercenaries to invade the Congo, create insecurity, and plunder and loot the resources of the Congo.
Former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta is the East African Community mediator in the DRC. Speaking early December in Nairobi on progress made in the latest round of talks aimed at securing peace in eastern DRC, he called on all foreign troops to leave the country.
I want to say the problem of foreign groups engaging in Congo and leaving destruction I have taken it up with the leadership of the East African community. And the same groups need to engage with their governments and leave Congo in peace.
53 armed groups from the Democratic Republic of Congo that met in Kenya for the third East African Community-led Nairobi peace process have agreed to lay down their arms as Kinshasa. There is a lot of skepticism if this fragile agreement will finally bring sustainable peace to the DRC.
I wish I could say that peace is finally coming to the DRC, but at the end of the day, in order for the DRC to have lasting peace, there has to be truth and there has to be justice. And justice in the DRC will have to start with the crimes documented in the UN mapping exercise report that was published by the UN and is now collecting dust at the UN for the last 12 years. And that document, that report, 600 pages almost, over 600 incidents, major atrocities committed in the Congo for a period of 10 years. And then since then, there has been even more. Until there is justice on those crimes, there is not going to be lasting peace in the Congo. And that type of justice is going to have to take on US, UK, European Union allies.
President Paul Kagame of Rwanda and Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC have exchanged harsh words and blamed each other for backing rebel groups. Now, do you think tensions between the two leaders will jeopardize the fragile truce reached in Nairobi?
There is no fragile truce. Just in the last week, the last couple of weeks, there were massacres of hundreds of people in areas occupied by the Rwandan military in the Congo. They call themselves the M23, but it's M23 rebels, but it's the Rwandan troops and the Ugandan troops that are backing them. They committed massacres of hundreds of civilians. So exchanging words, when they weren't exchanging words, there was no truce. They were still killing people. The invasions were still happening. So it's not about the war of words. I think the clarity is actually important. At some point, the world has to accept the fact that what is happening in the Congo is not internal rebellions, and we can stop pretending and we can talk about the reality of Rwanda and Uganda invading Congo.
Well, amid the upsurge in rebel attacks in eastern DRC, anti-United Nations protests have been held several times. Most of these protests have taken place in the streets of the city of Goma against the country's UN mission known as the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Residents accuse the UN mission, known by its French acronym MONUSCO, of failing to stop armed groups' decades-old fighting.
We've been watching the UN mission since the start. They have the logistical capacity they need. What are they doing with that? This is why we need to kick them out.
UN peacekeeping forces have failed to restore peace in the DRC, and now East African countries have deployed troops in eastern DRC. Foreign forces in eastern DRC have come under sharp criticism for failing to stop the massacre of civilians.
Let me start with the UN peacekeeping or so-called peacekeeping mission. They've been there for more than 20 years, I believe. Their budget, the last time I checked, was about $1 billion a year. I have to double check that number. It's $1 billion a year, I believe. But they are not engaged in actually stopping the violence. So the way I see it, the UN troops are just a force that's in the Congo as part of one of many who are exploiting the Congolese people, the resources of the Congo, and enriching themselves. The Congo doesn't need more military. In fact, what needs to happen is an arms embargo on the countries that are invading the Congo so that they do not have the weapons to invade the Congo.
In November, irate Congolese citizens burnt European Union flags during a protest in the city of Bukavu in eastern DRC against the M23 rebels. They also blamed Western powers such as the United States, Britain, and France for backing violence in this mineral-rich region.
The population living in the east of the DRC is the victim of multiple attacks by Rwanda and Uganda, with the blessing of the great powers, mainly the United States of America, Great Britain, France, and other countries. Let us express to the whole world our discontent with what we call injustice and international discrimination against the Congolese people that we are.
Western powers, through their regional proxies, have been accused of backing rebels in the DRC with the express objective of continuing the looting of Congo's minerals. Now, is the notorious M23 rebel group indirectly backed by Western imperialist powers?
Yes, I've said this before. The M23 rebel group, which is the deadliest in the Congo today and in yesteryears, which is also a reincarnation of multiple other previous rebel groups, is an extension of Western imperialism and Western neocolonialist policy in the region.
Our guest there says Western powers are backing the M23 rebel group that has killed thousands of Congolese civilians over the last few years in the mineral-rich eastern DRC. Our time is up. We shall keep our eyes on the situation in the eastern DRC and give you in-depth analysis on this conflict. I'd like to thank Claude Gachabuke for his time today. And that brings us to the end of this week's edition of Africa Today. It's been great having you. Drop us a line through our social media handle appearing on the screen. This show and all our previous episodes are available at our website, presstv.ir. Goodbye for now.